Hello, I'm Robert. Welcome to my channel where I fact check these stories that scare you. And this is people being scared by this story about the variant that was first identified in the UK. And we've got this clickbait headline saying it's 100% more deadly. The problem is that most people have not really, a lot of people, not most people, I don't have no idea, but a lot of people don't really understand percentages. And they think that 100% more deadly. They think, oh, well, it's 0.8% get and die at the moment. And they think 100% more deadly means 100.8, or, well, surely that just means 100% everyone dies. That's not what it means. So, to explain the maths, then suppose originally 18,000 died with the old variant. It's 100% of the 8, not of the 1,000. So 100% more deadly means an extra 8. So 16 in 1,000 will die with the new one, not 1,000 people. And actually, they've got a range of values. They don't know precisely how much more deadly it is, but their best bet is that it's 1.64 times more deadly, and that would mean that instead of 8 dying, then 13 would die. And remember, we've got these deaths reduced already by dexamethasone and the better ways of using oxygen and so on. So that reduction still works with the new variant. And then Dr. Mike Ryan, he commented on that when it was first raised a few weeks ago, that the virus doesn't need to be more deadly to increase deaths. And we've seen that in the United Kingdom. The deaths have been rising all autumn with the old variant mainly. Then gradually the new variant came in, and then it's been decreasing this year, and the deaths are now decreasing, and it's the new variant that has decreasing deaths. So that shows that stopping transmission, if we can stop the deaths, whatever the case fatality rate, in this case the new variant. And actually the new more transmissible variants are actually being controlled better than the old variant in the United Kingdom and in some other countries as well. Perhaps because we take it more seriously. It is not because of herd immunity, it's not because of, natural immunity, because that wouldn't cause that sharp change like that. So that's the. Then the other good news is that we've got the vaccines, and we just got the news earlier today, that the Pfizer vaccine is very effective against this variant first identified in the UK. Sorry, I have to remember to call it the variant first identified in the UK. We don't know where it came from originally. It's possible that the other variants, most of them don't have this thing of seeming to be more deadly. There's some question about the variant first identified in Brazil, about whether it might do this. I'm not sure what the latest research is about that. But it's all the same thing, that you've got that if you can reduce the cases, you can reduce the deaths. We also have many. Oh, I should do an article about that. I'll do another article about. You've got loads and loads of therapeutics as well as the vaccines. But now, if you've got the vaccine, then the Pfizer vaccine reduces mortality, and it reduces symptoms by at least 97%. So that means that instead of 100 people dying, you have only 3. And it's probably less than that for the deaths. I tried to find the raw data, and I couldn't find it. It was a very vague statement saying it was a 97% reduction for symptomatic cases, hospitalization and deaths. It can't be the same figure for all of them, so I'm not quite sure what that means. They don't seem to have published the raw data yet, but the deaths are very much reduced if you're vaccinated, and so that's on top of all of this. So if we do absolutely everything, so we get people vaccinated, we keep up with the physical distancing, the mask wearing and so on, then death's going to go way, way down, and it doesn't matter if you've got the new variant or the old variant. So the 97% more blocking stopping 97% with the new variant means that if originally 100 would be infected, then now only 3 will show symptoms, and only 6 would be infected and only 3 would show symptoms with the vaccine. So that's a huge reduction, far more than the increase from it being from 8 to 13, and that is with that new variant. So without the vaccine, it would be 13 died instead of 8 out of 1,000, but with the new vaccine, then out of those 13, then you would have about 0.4, I think it is, or something. Just try the quick multiplication in my head, I'm not sure, something like that. You'd have a fraction of a person for the same number of have I got that right? So you've got, if we would normally have been 13, then you get a 10 to the 1.3, and 100 of that is 0.13, and then multiply by 3 and you get 0.39, which is 0.4 per person. So anyway, so the but it would be, it's probably a lot less than that. I just haven't seen them, not sure what the actual figures are. So we really are in we really can't stop this new variant, and it hasn't got superpowers. It hasn't suddenly just learned how to teleport, and it is transmitted in exactly the same way. It's the World Health Organization ask all their partners to tell them about any suggestion of any change in the way it is being transmitted, any new way of transmission, and there is no change. And they continue to advise people in general COVID-19 wards to use droplet protection. You've got droplet protection and you've got good ventilation. You don't need all the N95 masks and all that, except with the ventilator, where people are being ventilated, you have intubation. So that's the same with all the variants. So they aren't infecting in a different way. But there is the probability, if you're in a crowded situation with poor ventilation, then it can transmit. It's not like SARS, which could transmit even with good ventilation. So anyway, that's all I want to say about that. 8 minutes. That seems about right. I mean, I had a bit more. What else do I have down here? Those are just the links. Stop it the same way. Oh yes, I think I talked about that in previous. I'll just very quickly say this. So, if we had a more, thank goodness it wasn't more deadly. But if we had a more deadly version of COVID way back in January, then it would have been stopped much faster. It would have led to far fewer deaths. And I think we can be pretty confident about that, because SARS is very similar to COVID. It's got the same R0, about 2 to 3. It's much more airborne than SARS, than COVID. In fact, one particular flight, just 3 hours long, one index case infected more than 20 people. Never had any, I don't think there's even been anyone infected in a plane flight with COVID. At the departure lounge, where they're changing maybe, but not in the plane flight. So it was much more transmission, much more airborne. It's got a shorter incubation period than COVID. It's very deadly. 1 in 5 die. So if we had had COVID first, and we only knew about COVID, and then we discovered SARS, we would think this could be much, much worse than COVID. Because the shorter incubation period means that it's got the same R0, but what's going to happen say it was doubling in a week with, well, worst time it was doubling 3 to 4 days with COVID, with doubling maybe half that period with SARS. if it was just spreading without being stopped. So, or certainly less than that. So SARS on the paper looks like a much worse disease, but we stopped it. And I think the reason is because it's more deadly. And if a disease as deadly as SARS, we'll do whatever is needed to stop it. And even if it meant to have a complete lockdown or something like that, which isn't really stop SARS with test, trace, isolate. And if we'd done effective test, trace, isolate, if we'd done a test, trace, isolate as effectively with COVID as we did for SARS, as countries did for SARS, it would never have spread the way it did. It's because it seemed so mild. It spread through countries that had no previous experience of SARS. I think that's the only reason that it spread so far and was such a deadly pandemic. So it's not really being more deadly means makes people take more care and they stop it. And we've now got the vaccines as well. So paradoxically, being more deadly actually, although you don't want it to be more deadly, nobody would want a disease to be more deadly, but it does mean that people are going to take it more seriously. But this is really quite a small change actually, from 8 to 13 in 1,000. But even just the idea that it is more deadly, and remember we've had we've had just as big a change. Dexamethasone reduced the number of deaths by about the same amount that this variant is increasing them. Not far off. So, in a way, it has somewhat restored the status back to what it was before dexamethasone. You can think of it as sort of annulling some of the effect of dexamethasone in the increase, just in the numbers, not because it acts against dexamethasone, but just numerically. It's almost the exact same increase as dexamethasone was a reduction. So, anyway, that's all I need to say. And I'm going to do another article and a video about all the wonderful therapeutics we've got coming along, but probably do that tomorrow. About just, there's so many therapeutics in the pipeline. We don't know of any particular one if it's going to pass, because that's why you do the clinical trials. So, but it seems very likely that some of them are going to pass the clinical trials, we'll have more very effective vaccines, very effective therapeutics, as well as the vaccines. So there's a huge amount of hope and positivity here. So please, it just hopefully some of you are beginning to learn by now. At least you get the first, when you see a headline like this, 100% more deadly, try to just think, there, those journalists again, they always do that. What is the real story? And and if any of you watching this are experts or are good at fact checking too, in our group we've got lots of people who get very easily scared by things like this, and or always people coming new to the group as well, and Doomsday Debunked on Facebook. So we very much welcome anyone who can join and help, and even the most basic, like in this case for instance, basic understanding of maths, and you could help people who think 100% for deadly means everyone dies, or people were asking that, saying, does this mean everyone dies and that we're going to go extinct? So these are kind of very simple questions that just very basic maths can sometimes be all that's needed. And so people asking that in our group means that there are hundreds of thousands of people, tens of thousands of people around the world, and that's what they looked at that title, and that's what they thought it meant. So I think journalists need to be much more careful, I think there should be some code of conduct for clickbait titles for journalists myself. I think it should be required in some way, at least as a code of conduct, if not legally required, to run these stories past people who could look at it from a different angle and make some kind of assessment of the psychological effect, how the headlines are understood by psychologically vulnerable people and by autistic people and by people who haven't got a very strong mathematical background. Because really, you can tell from our group, it has such a huge toll on some people. They've got so much to contend with anyway, and then every day they see clickbait headlines like this. And it's bad enough for the people in the group who've got our fact checkers who are helping them. But think about the people who haven't found our group and haven't found anyone else like us. And it's the journalists. I think the journalists really need to rethink clickbait headlines. Clickbait headlines maybe have their place, but not when the bait is a suggestion that everyone's going to die, or that the world is going to become uninhabitable and all these other things, and then you go and read the story and it's not actually saying that, but the headline suggests that, and that draws people in. I think that's not an unethical way to write a headline myself, and I think we need some change in that. I don't know how it can be done, but I just see this so often in our group. Clickbait headlines really have a huge psychological toll on some people. Anyway, it's not going to be easy to change this, I don't think. But you never know, it may happen very quickly if there's increasing awareness of it. But what you can do is kind of inoculate yourself and just get used to it. But it's especially difficult if you're autistic and you just don't have that kind of little space, not so much space between what you read and then changing it before it gets to you. And it then hits you before you've got a chance to kind of reflect on it and modify it. If I understand how autism works, they seem to have a very, very little gap between what they see and how they react to it, and then they get very scared and panicky, and then the panic also then gets in the way of being able to reason properly about it, even though they could be fit where they weren't panicking. But they don't have so much gap between what they see. They're very much in the moment, as it were. They don't have that gap between what they're reading and being able to modify it before it gets to the panic reaction. I think it's something like that. Whereas if you're not autistic, you've got a huge gap in between the two. You read something and then you can play around with it and think about it, and you're looking for things like, it doesn't take any time, it's more like maybe a second or two, but all that stuff comes in, and your mind is picking up on hyperbole and on metaphor and looking at the kind of nuances of, and then is this person using weasel words, and are they using emotive tone and everything, and then, oh, this is a clickbait headline, and all that. You just got that space between you and the headline. If you're autistic, if I understand right, you've got much less space. It just hits you straight like that, with very little ability to do anything to modify it, and then you panic, and then because you're panicking already, then it's much harder to then stop and reflect and think about it. So, but try to create a bit of space. Try, if you possibly can, to try and find a little bit of space for the activities you can do. If you've got a therapist, if the therapist has got things that can help you, to just find a way of just somehow creating a bit of space, or just have some days without being on the internet, or some days without following social media or wherever it is that you get these stories. Just try and create a little bit of space. Anyway, I'll upload this.